The north is cold and full of whispers.
The year was 283 AC, and Eddard Stark returned to Winterfell carrying two things: the grief of a war that had cost him his father, his brother, and his sister, and a secret that would define the rest of his life. In his arms, wrapped in his travel cloak, was a baby. The courtyard of Winterfell was gray and cold that morning. Spring had technically arrived, but the north remembered winter longer than anywhere else in Westeros. Mud mixed with melting snow, creating a treacherous slush that sucked at boots and hooves. Servants moved through the yard with the efficient purposefulness of people who had work to do and no time for sentiment. But when the gates opened and Lord Stark rode through with his small party of survivors, everyone stopped. The whole castle seemed to hold its breath. Catelyn Tully, Catelyn Stark now, though she'd only been married for a few months, stood at the entrance to the great keep. She was 7 months pregnant with Robb, her belly swollen beneath her heavy furs. Her red auburn hair was bound in a northern style she was still learning, and her hands were folded carefully over her stomach in a pose that suggested calm. She didn't feel. She had been waiting for this moment for what felt like years, waiting through pregnancy, through reports of battles won and lost, through the long northern winter for her husband to return from a war that had already taken so much from House Stark. She'd married Ned in a rush, in the midst of war, taking her sister Lysa's place when Brandon Stark was murdered and Lyanna Stark was stolen away. She'd bedded him once, one awkward, tender night, before he rode south to fight. She barely knew him, but he was hers, her husband, her lord, the father of the child she carried, and he was finally home. Ned dismounted slowly, like a man much older than his 20 years. The war had carved lines into his face that shouldn't have been there yet. His eyes were haunted, distant, like he was seeing ghosts that no one else could see. And in his arms was the bundle that would change everything. Catelyn started forward, her hand instinctively going to support her belly as she moved. Her heart was pounding. She'd imagined this reunion 1,000 times. Imagined throwing herself into his arms. Imagined his joy at seeing her pregnant with his child. Imagined the beginning of their real life together now that the war was done. What she hadn't imagined was the look on his face. The guilt. The shame. The desperate, pleading expression of a man who knew he'd done something unforgivable. She reached him and stopped, looking down at the bundle in his arms. A tiny hand emerged from the cloak, fingers curling reflexively. A baby. A newborn, by the look of it. "Ned," she said quietly. "What is this?" He didn't answer immediately. Around them, the servants had resumed their work, but she could feel their attention. Everyone in the courtyard was watching, even those who pretended not to. "His name is Jon," Ned said finally. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it properly in weeks. "He's mine. My blood." The words hung in the cold air between them. Catelyn felt something inside her chest crack, like ice breaking on a frozen river. She stared at her husband, this man she barely knew, this man whose child she carried, and felt the future she'd imagined crumbling to dust. "Yours," she repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Your bastard." Ned flinched at the word but didn't deny it. "Yes, I'm 7 months pregnant with your legitimate son," Catelyn said. Her voice was very quiet, very controlled. "And you returned to me carrying your bastard. A child you fathered while I was here, waiting, wondering if you would even survive to meet your heir. Cat, don't." She stepped back, her hand pressed to her belly, as if to shield her unborn son from this betrayal. "Don't say anything, not here. Not in front of everyone." She turned and walked back into the great keep, her spine straight, her head high. She would not cry, she would not show weakness. She was Lady Stark now, whether she felt like it or not. Behind her, she heard Ned give quiet orders to his men. Heard the baby start to cry, a thin, reedy sound that cut through her like a blade. She waited in their chambers. The solar that was now hers as Lady of Winterfell, though she'd barely had time to make it feel like home before Ned had ridden off to war. She stood at the window, looking out at the gray sky, and felt numb. This was her life now. This was her marriage. A husband who'd been unfaithful before they'd even had a chance to build something real. A bastard who would live in her home, a constant reminder of her husband's dishonor. The door opened. Ned entered, no longer carrying the baby. He'd given it to a wet nurse, presumably. Given his bastard to some servant to care for while he came to face his wife's anger. Good. Let him face it. "Cat," he started. "Tell me her name," Catelyn said, not turning from the window. Tell me which woman you dishonored our marriage for. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Ned's voice was strained. Cat, I can't explain. I can't tell you. Just accept that he's mine. That he needs to be here. That he needs to be protected. Protected? Catelyn repeated. She finally turned to face him. Protected from what? From the shame of being a bastard? That's rich, Ned, considering you're the one who made him one. There are things you don't understand. Then explain them to me. Her voice rose despite her intentions to stay calm. Explain to me how the Honorable Eddard Stark, who I've been told is the most honest man in the Seven Kingdoms, can return from war with a bastard and refuse to even tell his wife where the child came from. Ned stood in the doorway, and for a moment she saw something break in his expression. A wall crumbling. A decision being made. Her name was Lyanna, he said quietly. Catelyn froze. What? The baby's mother. Her name was Lyanna. Ned stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. My sister, Cat. Lyanna was his mother. The world tilted sideways. Catelyn reached out blindly, her hand finding the back of a chair. She gripped it hard, her knuckles going white. Your sister, Lyanna. But she, Rhaegar took her. Everyone knows Rhaegar Targaryen was his father. The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward, changing everything. No, Catelyn breathed. No, Ned, you can't mean. I found her at the Tower of Joy, Ned said. He moved to the window, keeping his distance from her, like he was afraid she might strike him. She'd given birth. She was dying. She made me promise to protect him, to keep him safe from Robert. Catelyn's mind was racing, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. Robert Baratheon, the new king. Robert who'd started a war to get Lyanna back. Robert who'd raged against Rhaegar Targaryen with the fury of a man betrayed. Robert who'd smashed in Rhaegar's chest on the trident with his warhammer. Robert who'd ordered the murder of Rhaegar's other children. Princess Rhaenys and baby Aegon, killed by Gregor Clegane on Tywin Lannister's orders. Butchered. And Robert had been glad of it. A Targaryen, Catelyn whispered. You brought a Targaryen baby into Winterfell. With Robert Baratheon on the throne. Robert, who would, she couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words. He would kill him, Ned said flatly. Robert would kill an infant without hesitation if he knew Rhaegar's son lived. And he would kill me for hiding him. He would probably kill you too, and our child, for being complicit. I'm not complicit. I didn't know. You didn't tell me. Catelyn's voice was rising again. She was shaking now, her whole body trembling with shock and fear and fury. I'm telling you now, Ned said. He turned to face her, and she saw tears on his cheeks. I'm telling you because you need to understand. You need to understand why the boy must be protected. Why your hatred of him, however justified it seems, is a danger to all of us. My hatred, Catelyn started, then stopped. Because he was right. She'd been ready to hate the baby. Had been preparing herself to endure the presence of her husband's bastard with cold civility at best. But this changed everything. If I hate him, people will notice, she said slowly, working through it. If I treat him as a shameful secret, they'll ask questions. Yes, and if they ask enough questions, if the wrong person starts wondering why Ned Stark's bastard has no mother anyone can name, they'll start looking for answers, Ned finished. And if they look too closely, they'll see that he looks like a Targaryen, Catelyn whispered. They'll see the truth. Silence fell between them. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The fire in the hearth crackled and popped. Why did you tell me? Catelyn asked finally. If the secret is so dangerous, why not keep it from me too? Why make me part of this treason? Ned looked at her with those gray Stark eyes, so full of grief and guilt and desperate hope. Because I need your help. I can't do this alone, Cat. I can't protect him and maintain the deception and keep everyone safe without you. And his voice broke. I couldn't lie to you. Not about this. Not for the rest of our lives. You deserve to know the truth. Catelyn moved to a chair and sat down heavily. Her hands were shaking. She folded them over her pregnant belly, feeling Robb move inside her, the child who would be born into this web of secrets and lies. Robert must never know, she said. Never, Ned agreed. No one can ever know. Not our children, not the servants, not the bannermen. No one. Just us. And Howland Reed, who was with me at the tower. He'll never speak of it. Catelyn's mind was working now, cutting through the shock and fear to find the practical solutions. This was what her father had trained her for: managing a great household, navigating political dangers, protecting her family. "We need a better story than bastard," she said. "That word carries too much weight, too much shame. It draws attention." Ned looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "He can't be your bastard, Ned. That makes him scandalous. It makes him a stain on your honor and mine. It makes people whisper and speculate about who his mother was. He needs to be your ward." "My ward? Your sister's orphaned son, placed in your care by his dying mother, a Stark fostering. Nothing more." Catelyn stood, pacing now as the plan formed in her mind. "Wards are common. Theon Greyjoy will come here as a ward soon enough. No one questions such arrangements. But people will still ask about his father. We say his father died in the war. A loyal man who served House Stark, killed at the Trident or the Tower of Joy, it doesn't matter. Lyanna loved him, bore his child, and died bringing the baby into the world. You, as her brother, took the orphaned boy as your ward. It's honorable. It's expected. It's utterly unremarkable." Ned stared at her. "That could work. It has to work." Catelyn stopped pacing and faced him. "Because the alternative is that we all die. You, me, our children, and the boy. Robert's paranoia about the Targaryens is absolute. If he ever suspects, he won't. We won't let him." Ned crossed to her and took her hands. "Cat, thank you. I know what I'm asking. I know the burden." She pulled her hands away. "Don't thank me. This isn't kindness. This is survival." Her voice was hard now, all business. "I will protect him because protecting him protects my children. I will treat him well because treating him poorly would raise questions. I will call him family because that's the only way to keep the secret safe. I understand. Do you?" Catelyn looked at him intently. "Ned, I will do this. I will play this role, but I need you to understand what you've done. You've brought treason into our home. You've made me complicit in hiding a Targaryen prince. Every day for the rest of our lives, we will live with the knowledge that one slip, one mistake, one suspicious mind could destroy everything." "I know," Ned said. "Believe me, Cat, I know. I've been living with that knowledge since the Tower of Joy." "Then you'll live with it longer," she said. "We both will. Until the day we die." She moved to the door, then paused with her hand on the latch. "What's his name?" "His real name? Jon. I named him Jon, after Jon Arryn." "Jon," Catelyn repeated. She nodded once, sharply. "Then Jon he'll be. Jon Stark, Ward of Winterfell. Lyanna's orphaned son. That's the story. That's the truth everyone will know." She opened the door and left him standing there in the solar, alone with his grief and his secrets and the weight of what he'd asked her to carry. The burden of lies. The days that followed were a careful dance of deception. Ned told the story to the household, a story he and Catelyn had refined together in whispered conversations late at night. Lyanna had fallen in love with a loyal soldier in Rhaegar's household, a man whose name was lost to war. She'd borne his child in secret at the Tower of Joy. She'd died in childbirth, but not before extracting a promise from Ned to raise her son as a Stark ward. It was close enough to the truth to feel real, distant enough from it to be safe. The household accepted it because Lord Stark said it was so, and Eddard Stark did not lie. The servants whispered about it for a few weeks. Tragic Lady Lyanna, dying to bring her bastard-born son into the world. But the whispers faded quickly. Wards were common. Fostering was normal. There were more interesting things to gossip about than one more child in a great lord's household. Catelyn played her part perfectly. She had the baby moved to a nursery near the family quarters. She hired a good wet nurse, a woman named Willa, who asked no questions and told no tales. She made sure Jon was well-fed, well-dressed, well-cared for. Not with love. She couldn't manage love, not for a child whose very existence was a threat to everything she held dear. But with the careful, calculated protection of someone who understood that his safety was her family's safety. 2 months after Ned's return, Catelyn gave birth to Robb, her son, her heir, a healthy, red-faced baby with Tully coloring and a set of lungs that could wake the entire castle. She held him in her arms and looked at his perfect face and felt love crash over her like a wave. This was her child, her blood. the future of House Stark. And in a nursery down the hall, another baby slept. A baby with Stark coloring and Targaryen blood, whose very existence was a blade hanging over all their necks. "He looks like you," Ned said softly, gazing down at Robb. "Strong, beautiful, perfect." "He's everything I hoped for," Catelyn said. She looked up at her husband. "And the other boy, Jon?" "Growing well. Willa says he's a quiet baby. Sleeps through the night already." "Good." Catelyn hesitated, then said, "Ned, we need to be careful about how we treat them as they grow. If Robb is given everything and Jon is given scraps, people will wonder. But if they're treated exactly the same, people will wonder about that too," Ned finished. "I know, it's a narrow path we're walking. Then we walk it carefully." Catelyn looked down at Robb, at her son, and made a silent vow. She would protect this child above all else, and if protecting Jon was necessary to protect Robb, then that's what she would do. Whatever it took. The months turned into years. Robb and Jon grew side by side, two boys who could have been brothers if not for the accident of birth. They learned to walk within weeks of each other, learned to talk, to run, to play. Catelyn watched them both, with eyes trained to see danger in every interaction. When Jon stumbled and fell in the courtyard, she was there to pick him up before anyone else could reach him. When he caught a fever at age 2, she sat by his bedside alongside Ned, because a lady who ignored her husband's ward while he was ill would raise questions. When the servants praised Jon's gray Stark eyes or his dark Stark hair, she smiled and agreed. "He has Lyanna's look," she would say. She would be proud to see him growing so strong. The lie became truth through repetition. Jon was Lyanna's son. Everyone said so. Everyone believed it. And because Catelyn protected him and Ned loved him and the household accepted him, no one looked deeper. But the fear never left her. Every time a rider arrived from the south, Catelyn's heart would skip. Every time a visiting lord looked at Jon too closely, she would feel ice in her veins. Every time Robert Baratheon's name was mentioned, she would think, "He must never know. He must never come here. He must never see the boy." The secret lived and breathed in Winterfell's walls. It shaped every decision, colored every interaction, infected every moment of peace with the knowledge that it could all come crashing down. When Jon was 3 and Robb was 3.5, Catelyn had her second child, a daughter this time with tully red hair and a sweet, gentle disposition. They named her Sansa. Catelyn loved her instantly, fiercely, with the same overwhelming maternal devotion she felt for Robb, her daughter, her precious girl. And as she nursed Sansa in the quiet of her chambers, she thought about the role Sansa would play in maintaining the deception. Because daughters learned from their mothers. Daughters absorbed their mother's values, their mother's prejudices, their mother's loves and hates. If Catelyn was cold to Jon, Sansa would be cold to Jon. And a child's cruelty could be far more dangerous than an adult's calculated restraint. So when Sansa was old enough to notice Jon, to ask questions about the quiet, dark-haired boy who lived with them, Catelyn was ready. "Is he my brother?" Sansa asked one day, watching Jon and Robb play with wooden swords in the yard. "He's your cousin," Catelyn said carefully. "Your father's ward. Your Aunt Lyanna's son. Why doesn't he live with his father? His father died in the war, sweet one. Before Jon was even born. Your father took him in because that's what family does. We protect each other." Sansa considered this with the seriousness of a 4-year-old trying to understand the world. "So we have to be nice to him?" "Yes," Catelyn said firmly. "We treat Jon with kindness and respect. He's Pack. Do you understand?" "Pack," Sansa repeated, the northern concept taking root in her southern-bred mind. Like the wolves, Catelyn agreed. It was such a small thing. A simple conversation with a child. But it mattered. It shaped how Sansa saw Jon, which shaped how Jon saw himself, which shaped how the household saw them all. The web of lies grew stronger with each thread Catelyn added. When Jon was 5, Ned began teaching the boys to fight. Nothing serious yet, just wooden swords and basic stances. But Catelyn watched from the sidelines and saw the way Robb and Jon moved together, the natural synchronicity of children who'd grown up as brothers in all but name. "They're good," Sir Roderick Cassell said, standing beside her. The Master-at-Arms was an older man, gruff and loyal, who'd served House Stark for decades. Both of them. Natural warriors. "They train hard," Catelyn said neutrally. "Aye, and they push each other. The wards got quick feet, Quicker than Robb, but Robb's stronger. They balance each other well. Catelyn nodded, saying nothing. But inside, she felt the familiar twist of anxiety. Jon was good at fighting. Too good, perhaps. Would that draw attention? Would people start to wonder where he'd gotten such natural talent? Or was she being paranoid? Was she seeing threats where none existed? She didn't know. That was the hell of it. She never knew what was safe and what was dangerous. Every day was a guess, a gamble, a prayer that she'd made the right choices. "My lady," Sir Roderick said quietly. "If I may, you've done well by the boy. Many ladies wouldn't have been so kind to their lord's ward." Catelyn looked at him sharply, searching his weathered face for hidden meanings. But Sir Roderick's expression was open, sincere. He wasn't probing, he was simply observing. "Jon is family," Catelyn said, repeating the words she'd said 1,000 times. "Family takes care of its own." "Aye," Sir Roderick agreed. "The Starks have always understood that. It's what makes your house strong." He moved back to the training yard, shouting instructions at the boys. Catelyn stayed where she was, watching her son and her husband's ward fight with wooden swords, and wondered how much longer they could maintain this lie. How much longer before someone asked the wrong question? How much longer before Robert Baratheon's attention turned north? How much longer before the blade hanging over their heads finally fell? The quiet years. The next few years were the easiest, though easy was a relative term when you were living with treason. Catelyn had 2 more children, Arya when Jon was 6 and Bran when Jon was 8. With each birth, the household grew louder, busier, more chaotic, and in that chaos, Jon became less remarkable, just another child running through Winterfell's halls. Arya, wild and wolf-blooded from birth, attached herself to Jon with the fierce devotion only a younger sibling could muster. She followed him everywhere, demanded to be included in his games, threw tantrums when she was told she was too small to train with him and Robb. "Jon, Jon, teach me to shoot," she would cry, waving a stick like it was a bow. And Jon, patient and gentle in ways that surprised Catelyn, would crouch down to her level. "You're too little yet, Arya. When you're bigger, I promise I'll teach you." "You promise?" "I promise." Catelyn watched these interactions with complicated feelings. She was grateful that Jon was kind to her children. It made the deception easier, made the household more harmonious. But there was also something painful about it, about watching a boy who didn't know his own truth be so effortlessly good to the siblings who shared his blood. Did he wonder about his real father? Did he lie awake at night and imagine what the man had been like? Did he resent Ned for not talking about it? If he did, he never showed it. Jon was quiet, composed, always watching and rarely speaking unless spoken to. He trained hard, studied with Maester Luwin, helped with chores without being asked. He was the perfect ward, grateful, obedient, unobtrusive. Sometimes Catelyn wondered if that was a mask. If beneath the quiet exterior, Jon was angry or hurt or confused about his place in the world. Other times she wondered if this was just who he was. If being raised with love and acceptance, even the calculated version she provided, had made him confident enough to be gentle. She didn't know, and she couldn't ask, because asking would mean revealing that she cared about more than just the strategic necessity of his presence. When Jon was 10 and Robb was 11, they found the direwolf pups. Ned had taken the boys on a ride beyond Winterfell's walls, a lesson in tracking and woodcraft. They'd come across a dead direwolf, killed by a stag's antler still lodged in her belly, and next to her, 6 pups. 5 dark, 1 white, all alive despite their mother's death. Robb had wanted to keep them immediately. Jon had been more cautious, pointing out that direwolves were dangerous, that they grew large and wild, that perhaps it was better to give them a quick death than let them starve. But Ned had looked at the pups, 6 of them, for 6 Stark children, and seen the hand of the old gods. "We'll take them," he'd decided. 1 for each of the children. They'd ridden back to Winterfell with the pups bundled in cloaks, mewling and squirming. 5 for Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon, who was just a toddler now, the baby of the family. And 1, the white one, the albino with red eyes who made no sound, for Jon. Catelyn had been horrified when she saw them. Direwolves in Winterfell? It was madness. They'd grow to the size of ponies. They'd be dangerous, unpredictable, possibly uncontrollable. But Ned had been adamant. "They're signs, Cat. The direwolf is the sigil of House Stark. Finding these pups means something." "It means we'll have 6 wild animals in our home," Catelyn had replied sharply. But she'd let it happen, because opposing Ned on this would have caused a fight, and fights drew attention. The children had named their wolves quickly. Rob's was Grey Wind. Sansa's was Lady. Arya's was Nymeria. Bran's was Summer. Rickon's was Shaggy Dog. And Jon's was Ghost. Named for his silence, for the way he moved without sound, for the otherworldly quality of his red eyes and white fur. Catelyn watched Jon with his wolf, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the northern cold. There was something uncanny about the bond between them. Ghost followed Jon everywhere, slept at the foot of his bed, seemed to understand him without words. The other wolves bonded with their children too, of course. But Ghost and Jon, it was different, deeper, almost unnatural. It's like they share a soul, Maester Luwin observed one day, watching Jon and Ghost in the yard. Don't be superstitious, Catelyn had replied, more sharply than she intended. But privately she wondered if there was something in Jon's blood, some Targaryen legacy, that allowed for this kind of bond. The Targaryens had dragons, perhaps the Starks had wolves. And if Jon was both Stark and Targaryen, both ice and fire, she didn't finish the thought. Couldn't afford to think too deeply about what Jon was or what he might become. When Jon was 12, he asked Ned about his mother for the first time. Catelyn wasn't there for the conversation, but Ned told her about it that night, lying in bed beside her in the darkness. He wanted to know what she was like, Ned said quietly. Lyanna. He said he's old enough now to hear the truth about his mother. Catelyn's breath caught. What did you tell him? The truth. That Lyanna was fierce and wild and brave. That she loved to ride. That she died too young, bringing him into the world. That she loved him, even though she never got to know him. Did he ask about his father? Yes. And? Ned was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. I told him his father was a good man who died in the war. That Lyanna loved him. That if he'd lived, he would have been proud of Jon. Do you think Jon believes you? I don't know. He's smart, Cat. He's always been smart. And he's at that age where children start questioning everything, start trying to make sense of their place in the world. Catelyn rolled onto her side to look at her husband. In the darkness, she could barely make out his profile. Do you think he suspects? Suspects what? That I'm lying? That there's more to his parentage than I've told him? Ned sighed. Maybe. But what can he do with suspicions? He has no proof. No way to find answers. And he trusts me. He believes I'm telling him everything he needs to know. He won't always be 12, Catelyn said. Someday he'll be a man. And men have ways of finding answers to questions they won't let go of. I know. Ned reached out in the darkness and found her hand. I know, Cat. But what's the alternative? Tell him the truth and burden him with a secret that could get him killed? He's safer not knowing. Catelyn wasn't sure she agreed, but she didn't argue. They'd had this conversation before, in various forms, and it never led anywhere productive. Jon would not learn the truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It was safer that way. For everyone. When Jon was 13, Theon Greyjoy came to Winterfell. The Greyjoy rebellion had ended with the defeat of Balon Greyjoy's forces and the death of his two eldest sons. His youngest son, Theon, was taken as a ward, a hostage in all but name, to ensure the Iron Islands' continued loyalty to the crown. Ned had agreed to foster the boy, though Catelyn could see the weight of it in his eyes. Taking a child from his family as surety for their good behavior was a harsh custom, and Ned hated it. But it was necessary. And so Theon Greyjoy, aged 10, came to Winterfell. He was a cocky, arrogant boy with the sharp features and dark coloring of the Ironborn. He bristled at being called a ward, and made it clear from the start that he was a Greyjoy, not a Stark, and would not be tamed like a northern wolf. Jon, to his credit, tried to befriend him. It's strange at first, Jon told Theon during those early days, being a ward in someone else's home. But the Starks are good people. They'll treat you fairly. Theon had looked at Jon with something between pity and contempt. You're a ward too? Yes. My mother was Lord Stark's sister. She died when I was born, so he took me in. At least you're a Stark, Theon said. Got the name, got the blood. I'm a prisoner with a pretty title. You're not a prisoner. Don't. Theon's voice was sharp. Don't lie to make me feel better. I know what I am. My father lost a war, and I'm the price he paid. At least have the honesty to admit it. Jon had fallen silent, and Catelyn, watching from a distance, had felt a strange pang of sympathy for both boys. Two wards, Two orphans in their way, both trying to find their place in a household that wasn't truly theirs. But where Jon had been raised with acceptance, Theon wore his resentment like armor. Over the years, they developed a complicated relationship, not quite friends, not quite rivals. They trained together, ate together, lived together, but there was always a distance, always a tension. Theon resented Jon's easy acceptance by the Starks. Jon was patient with Theon's barbs and cruelty, but there were limits. "You're too soft," Theon would say. "Too grateful. They've made you into a dog, Jon. A loyal northern dog who comes when whistled and wags his tail for scraps. Better than a dog than a wolf who bites the hand that feeds him," Jon would reply quietly. These exchanges worried Catelyn. Worried her because Theon was perceptive, because he saw things others missed, because his outsider status gave him a perspective that could be dangerous. What if Theon noticed something about Jon that he shouldn't? What if he asked questions that led to answers better left buried? But the years passed, and nothing happened. Theon remained oblivious, focused on his own grievances, and Jon remained careful, composed, giving nothing away. The secret held. When Jon was 14, Catelyn realized something that should have been obvious but somehow hadn't fully registered until that moment. She was watching Jon and Robb spar in the training yard. They were teenagers now, nearly men, tall and strong and skilled with their weapons. Robb had his father's build, broad shoulders, solid stance, the kind of presence that commanded attention. But Jon moved like water, fast, graceful, unpredictable. He was smaller than Robb, leaner, but he fought with an intensity that was almost frightening. Sir Roderick called a halt to the match, and the boys separated, breathing hard, grinning at each other with the easy camaraderie of brothers who'd spent their entire lives together. "You're getting faster," Robb said, clapping Jon on the shoulder. "You're getting stronger," Jon replied. "Nearly knocked my sword out of my hand that last exchange." Nearly doesn't count. They laughed and moved to the water barrel, drinking deeply, ghost and gray wind materializing from wherever they'd been lounging to press against their respective people. And Catelyn, watching them, thought, these boys would die for each other. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't hyperbole. It was simple fact. Robb and Jon had been raised as brothers. They loved each other with the fierce, uncomplicated loyalty of pack. If one was threatened, the other would fight without hesitation. Which meant that if Jon's secret ever came out, if Robert Baratheon or anyone else tried to hurt him, Robb would stand in the way, would defend him, would die for him if necessary. Her son would die protecting a Targaryen prince, and he wouldn't even know why he was doing it. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent 14 years protecting Jon to keep her family safe, but in doing so, she'd created a bond between Robb and Jon that was now its own form of danger. If the truth came out, Robb wouldn't stand aside, he would fight. And in fighting, he would mark himself as a traitor alongside Ned and Jon. She'd saved Jon to protect her family. But now her family's fate was intertwined with his in ways she couldn't undo. The web she'd woven had caught them all. That night she told Ned what she'd realized. He listened quietly, his expression grave. "I know," he said finally. "I've known for years. The boys love each other. That was always going to be the outcome of raising them together. But don't you see the danger? If Robert comes for Jon, Robert won't come for Jon. He doesn't know Jon exists. Not as a Targaryen." Ned's voice was firm. "And even if he did, even if the worst happened, would you rather the boys hated each other? Rather we'd raise Jon to be isolated and alone, so that when he died no one would care?" "Of course not," Catelyn said. But her voice lacked conviction. "We made choices, Cat. Choices that seemed right at the time. Choices that kept Jon alive and gave our children a brother who loves them." Ned took her hand. "We can't unmake those choices now. All we can do is continue what we've started. Continue protecting him. Continue keeping the secret. And pray to the old gods and the new that it's enough." Catelyn wanted to argue. Wanted to say that there must be another way, some path they hadn't considered, some solution that would keep everyone safe. But she knew there wasn't. They'd chosen this path 14 years ago. There was no turning back now. All they could do was keep walking forward and hope they didn't fall. The weight of truth. When Jon was 15, he became a man by Northern standards. Old enough to fight in a war if one came. Old enough to make his own decisions about his future. And old enough to start asking the kinds of questions that had no good answers. It started small. Comments about his appearance, about how he looked more Stark than some of Ned's true-born children. Questions about Lyanna, about what she'd been like, about whether she'd really loved the man who'd fathered him, or if it had been something more complicated. Ned deflected when he could, gave vague, comforting answers that revealed nothing. But Catelyn could see the strain it put on him, could see the weight of the lies accumulating like snow on a roof, waiting for the moment when the burden became too much and everything collapsed. She was in the kitchen one afternoon reviewing the household accounts with the steward, when Jon appeared in the doorway. "Lady Catelyn," he said formally, "may I speak with you?" She looked up surprised. Jon rarely sought her out for private conversations. "Of course. Come in." He entered, Ghost at his heels as always. The white wolf had grown massive, nearly as tall as a pony now, with red eyes that seemed to see through everything they looked at. "What is it, Jon?" Catelyn asked, waving the steward away. When they were alone, she gestured to a seat. "Sit." Jon sat, but he looked uncomfortable. He fidgeted with his hands, a rare tell for someone usually so composed. "I wanted to thank you," he said finally. Catelyn blinked. "Thank me? For what?" "For treating me well. For accepting me into your household when you didn't have to. I know I'm not your son. I know that having your lord husband's ward living here must be strange sometimes. But you've been kind to me. You've protected me. And I wanted you to know I'm grateful." The words were sincere, heartfelt, and they cut Catelyn deeper than any blade could have. Kind, he called her. Protective. As if her actions had been motivated by generosity instead of naked terror. "Your family, Jon," she said, repeating the words she'd said 1,000 times. "Family takes care of its own. But I'm not really family, am I?" Jon's voice was quiet but steady. "Not by blood. Not truly. I'm your husband's sister's son. That's not the same as being your son." Catelyn's breath caught. This was dangerous ground. This was the kind of conversation that could lead to revelations neither of them were ready for. "Blood isn't the only thing that makes family," she said carefully. "You've grown up in this house. You've trained with Robb and played with Arya and climbed the walls with Bran. Your pack. That's what matters." "Pack," Jon repeated. He looked down at Ghost, who sat pressed against his leg. "The wolves understand that better than we do, I think. Ghost doesn't care that I'm not Robb's blood brother. He just knows we're together. We're pack." "Yes," Catelyn said. Then, because something in Jon's expression tugged at her, "Are you troubled, Jon? Is something wrong?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wonder about my father? About who he really was?" Catelyn's blood went cold. "Your father was a loyal man who died in Robert's rebellion. Your uncle has told you this. I know what he's told me. But there are no stories about this man. No one remembers him. No one can tell me what he looked like, or what he was like, or why my mother loved him." Jon looked up, and there was something sharp and searching in his gray eyes. "It's like he never existed. Like he's a ghost, just like my wolf. People die in wars, Jon. Their stories die with them sometimes. But someone must remember. Someone must have known him. And yet Uncle Ned can't even tell me his name. Says it's better if I don't know. That it would only bring me pain." Jon's hands clenched into fists. "How can knowing my father's name bring me pain? Unless there's something about him. Something shameful." "There's nothing shameful," Catelyn said sharply. Too sharply. She modulated her tone, forced calm. "Jon, your uncle is trying to protect you. Some truths are better left buried. Some questions are better left unasked. Why? Because the world is dangerous. Because knowledge can be weaponized. Because..." She stopped herself before she said too much. "Because your uncle loves you and wants you safe. Trust that, even if you don't understand it." Jon looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. I trust Uncle Ned. I do. But Lady Catelyn, yes. If there's ever something I need to know, something important, something that could keep me or the family safe, you'll tell me, won't you? You won't keep me in the dark if the darkness becomes dangerous?" It was an impossible question. A question Catelyn couldn't answer honestly without revealing everything. "I'll tell you what you need to know when you need to know it," she said finally. "You have my word." It wasn't a lie, exactly. But it wasn't the truth either. Just another careful evasion in a lifetime of them. Jon seemed to accept it. He stood, Ghost rising with him. "Thank you for speaking with me, my lady." "Jon," Catelyn said as he reached the door. He turned back. You're a good boy. You've grown into a fine young man. Your mother, Lyanna, she would be proud of you. Something complicated crossed Jon's face. Gratitude, sadness, and underneath it all, a hunger for something he couldn't name. Thank you, he said again. And then he was gone, ghost a white shadow at his heels. Catelyn sat alone in the kitchen and felt the weight of all her lies pressing down on her like a physical thing. How much longer could they keep this up? How much longer before Jon's questions led to answers? How much longer before the secret that had defined their lives for 15 years finally broke free? She didn't know. But she knew, with the certainty of someone who'd lived with fear for far too long, that the reckoning was coming. The only question was whether they'd survive it. The Raven arrived on a gray autumn morning when Jon was 16. Catelyn was in the solar reviewing the winter stores with Maester Luwin when the black bird came flapping through the window, a message cylinder attached to its leg. The Maester took it with practiced efficiency, unrolled the small slip of parchment and read. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock, to something that looked like dread. My lady, he said quietly, you should fetch Lord Stark immediately. Catelyn's stomach dropped. What is it? King Robert is coming north. He'll be here within the fortnight. The parchment slipped from Catelyn's fingers. For a moment the room seemed to tilt sideways, and she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. Robert Baratheon, the king, coming to Winterfell. Coming here, where Jon lived and breathed and walked the halls every day. Jon with his gray Stark eyes and his dark hair and his Targaryen blood running through his veins. Jon whose very existence was treason. My lady? Maester Luwin was looking at her with concern. Are you unwell? I'm fine. The lie came automatically. Find Lord Stark. Tell him immediately. And Maester... She met his eyes. Tell no one else yet. Not until Lord Stark and I have discussed how to prepare for the king's arrival. If Luwin found the request strange, he didn't show it. He bowed and left, his chain clinking softly. Catelyn stood alone in the solar and felt 15 years of carefully maintained control threatening to shatter. Robert Baratheon was coming to Winterfell, the man who'd killed Rhaegar Targaryen on the Trident, the man who'd celebrated the murder of Targaryen children, the man who would execute Jon without hesitation if he knew the truth. And they had 2 weeks to prepare for his arrival. Ned found her in their bedchamber an hour later. She was standing at the window, staring out at the courtyard where Jon and Robb were training with Sir Roderick. The boys moved through their forms with the easy grace of years of practice, their wolves watching from the sidelines. Cat, Ned said quietly. Luwin told me. He's coming here, Catelyn said without turning around. After 16 years of staying south, of keeping his distance, he's coming north. Why now, Ned? What does he want? I don't know. The message said he's bringing his family, the queen, the children. It sounds like a royal progress, not a military inspection. That's supposed to comfort me? Catelyn turned to face him. Robert Baratheon is bringing his entire family to Winterfell. He'll stay for weeks, probably. He'll eat in our hall and sleep under our roof and walk through our corridors. And every moment he's here, Jon will be in danger. Jon won't be in danger if Robert doesn't suspect anything. How can he not suspect? Catelyn's voice was rising. Jon is 16, Ned. He's not a baby who can be hidden away. He trains with your sons. He sits at your table. He's tall and strong and bears the Stark look so clearly that anyone with eyes can see he's your blood. What happens when Robert looks at him and sees Lyanna? What happens when he starts asking questions? Ned crossed to her and took her hands. His palms were rough, calloused from years of sword work. Robert will see what we tell him to see. Jon is my ward. Lyanna's orphaned son. He has no reason to suspect anything else. Unless he looks too closely. Unless he asks who Jon's father was. Unless, Cat, Ned's grip tightened. Listen to me. We've kept this secret for 16 years. We can keep it for a few more weeks. But we have to be smart. We have to be careful. And we cannot let fear make us act in ways that draw attention. Catelyn took a shaky breath. He was right. Panicking wouldn't help. But the fear that had lived inside her for 16 years, the constant gnawing terror that their secret would be discovered, was threatening to overwhelm her completely. What do we do? She asked. We act normal. We prepare for a royal visit like any great house would. We show the king and his family northern hospitality, and we make sure Jon doesn't do anything to stand out. How do we do that? Ned was quiet for a moment, thinking. We keep Jon busy, training, hunting, duties around the castle. We make sure he's occupied and away from the main festivities as much as possible without it seeming strange. And we talk to him. We make sure he understands how to behave around royalty. He's never met a king before. Neither have most of our people. That's normal, expected. Ned released her hands and moved to the window, looking down at the training yard. Jon is smart, Cat. He's cautious. He won't draw attention to himself if he understands the stakes. But he doesn't understand the stakes, Catelyn said. He doesn't know what he is. He doesn't know what danger he's in. Then maybe, Ned stopped himself. Maybe what? He turned back to her, and there was something conflicted in his expression. Maybe it's time to tell him. Not everything. But enough. Enough that he understands why he needs to be careful around Robert. Catelyn's blood went cold. No, absolutely not. He's 16, Ned. If he knows the truth, if he knows what he is, he'll know why his life depends on maintaining the secret. He'll understand why we've protected him all these years. He'll be able to make informed decisions about how to behave around the king. Or he'll panic. Or he'll do something rash. Or he'll look at Robert with fear in his eyes and give everything away. Catelyn shook her head vehemently. No, we can't tell him. Not now. Not with Robert coming. Then when? Ned's voice was frustrated. Cat, Jon is nearly a man grown. He's asking questions we can't answer. He knows something isn't right about his parentage. If we keep him in the dark much longer, he's going to start looking for answers on his own. And that's more dangerous than telling him the truth in a controlled way. After Robert leaves. After the danger has passed. Then we can consider telling him. And if something happens during the visit? If Robert asks questions Jon doesn't know how to answer? Then we handle it, Catelyn said. We deflect. We protect him like we always have. But Ned, I am begging you, don't tell him now. Not with Robert coming to Winterfell in less than 2 weeks. The risk is too great. Ned looked at her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. All right, we wait. But Cat, after Robert leaves, we have this conversation again. We can't keep Jon ignorant forever. I know, Catelyn said. But privately, she thought, we can try. The preparations for the king's arrival consumed the next 2 weeks. The entire castle was cleaned from top to bottom. Guest chambers were aired out and furnished. The kitchens worked day and night preparing food and drink. Servants were drilled on proper royal etiquette. The training yard was cleared and smoothed for potential tournaments. Through it all, Catelyn moved with mechanical efficiency, overseeing everything while her mind churned with anxiety. She watched Jon constantly, cataloging his features with new paranoia. Did he look like Rhaegar? She'd never seen Rhaegar Targaryen in person. He'd been dead for 16 years. But she'd heard the songs. Heard about the silver-haired prince with purple eyes who'd been called the most beautiful man in Westeros. Jon didn't have silver hair or purple eyes. He was all Stark, dark hair, gray eyes, long face. He looked like Ned, like Lyanna, like the North made flesh. But what if Robert saw something she didn't? What if there was something in Jon's bearing or his voice or the way he moved that would remind Robert of Rhaegar? She couldn't risk it, couldn't take the chance. 3 days before Robert's arrival, Catelyn found Jon in the armory, cleaning his sword. Ghost lay at his feet, red eyes watching her approach. Jon, she said, we need to talk. He looked up, surprised. Is something wrong, my lady? The king is coming. I know. The whole castle knows. Everyone's been preparing. Yes, and I need to speak with you about how you should conduct yourself during his visit. Jon set down his sword and gave her his full attention. All right. Catelyn sat on a bench, gathering her thoughts. How did she explain this without revealing too much? How did she make him understand the danger without telling him why the danger existed? King Robert was your Uncle Ned's closest friend, she began. They were raised together at the Eyrie. They fought together in the rebellion. But Robert can be unpredictable. He drinks too much. He says things he shouldn't. He can be cruel when the mood takes him. I understand, Jon said. You want me to be careful around him? I want you to be cautious. Respectful but not overly familiar. The king may ask questions about you, about your mother, about your father. If he does, answer simply and honestly. Don't elaborate, don't volunteer information. Jon's brow furrowed. Why would the king care about me? I'm just a ward. You're Lord Stark's ward. The king will notice you because you're part of this household. And Jon, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Your mother was Lyanna Stark. Robert loved Lyanna. He may ask about her. If he does, speak respectfully but briefly. Don't engage him in long conversations about her. Do you understand? Something shifted in Jon's expression. Robert Baratheon loved my mother. Catelyn cursed herself internally. She'd said too much. Before everything happened with Rhaegar. Before the war. I didn't know that. Jon was quiet for a moment. Does he know about me? That I'm her son? I don't know. Perhaps. But it doesn't matter. You're a ward raised in the north. You have no connection to the crown or to southern politics. You're simply invisible, Jon finished. You want me to be invisible? I want you to be safe, Catelyn said. The truth of that statement surprised her. It wasn't just about protecting the family anymore. Somewhere over the past 16 years, Jon's safety had become important to her in its own right. The king's court is dangerous, Jon. Full of people who play games with other people's lives. The less attention you draw, the safer you'll be. Jon studied her face. You're frightened. Yes. Of Robert? Of what could happen if things go wrong, if the wrong questions are asked or the wrong answers are given? She met his eyes. Jon, I need you to trust me. I need you to be careful during this visit. Can you do that? Of course. Jon's voice was steady, certain. I trust you, Lady Catelyn. If you say I need to be careful, I'll be careful. Relief washed over her. Thank you. She stood to leave, but Jon spoke again. My lady, why are you so worried? There's something you're not telling me. Something about my mother or my father or… Jon, Catelyn's voice was sharp. There are some questions that shouldn't be asked. Some truths that are dangerous to know. Please, trust that I'm protecting you. Trust that your uncle is protecting you. And don't dig any deeper. Jon looked like he wanted to argue. But finally, he nodded. All right? I trust you. Catelyn left the armory with her heart pounding. That had been too close. Far too close. King Robert Baratheon arrived at Winterfell on a cold autumn morning, his massive retinue stretching out behind him like a golden serpent. The Stark household assembled in the courtyard to greet him. Ned stood at the front, his face grave. Catelyn stood at his right, her children arrayed beside her, Robb tall and strong at 16, Sansa beautiful at 13, Arya wild at 11, Bran energetic at 9, Rickon just a toddler at 3. And Jon. Jon stood slightly apart, near Theon Greyjoy, positioned as a ward rather than a son, but close enough to be part of the household, close enough to be noticed. Catelyn's eyes tracked him constantly. He looked calm, composed, his face carefully neutral. Ghost was nowhere to be seen. They'd agreed the direwolves should be kept away from the king's party until their temperament could be assessed. Robert rode through the gates on a horse that looked ready to collapse under his weight. The king had gone to fat since the war. His muscle turned to bulk, his legendary strength buried under layers of excess. But his presence was still commanding, still powerful. He was a man used to being obeyed. Beside him rode Queen Cersei Lannister, beautiful and cold as a winter morning. Her golden hair was elaborately styled, her green eyes assessing everything with calculation. Behind them came their children, Prince Joffrey, Princess Myrcella, Prince Tommen, and a host of Lannister soldiers and courtiers. Robert dismounted with a grunt and stood before Ned, looking him up and down. For a moment there was silence. Then Robert grinned, a huge, genuine smile, and pulled Ned into a crushing embrace. Ned, gods, you're a sight for sore eyes. Too long, my friend. Far too long. Your Grace, Ned said, his voice warm despite his formal words. You honor us with your presence. Honor my ass. I've been rotting in King's Landing while you've been up here in the clean cold. I envy you, old friend. I truly do. Robert released Ned and turned to Catelyn. Lady Stark, more beautiful than I remember. The North agrees with you. You're too kind, Your Grace, Catelyn said, curtsying. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Robert's eyes moved past her to the children. And these are the pups? My, you've been busy, Ned. Let me see, this must be the eldest. Robb, isn't it? Robb bowed. Yes, Your Grace. It's an honor to meet you. Strong-looking boy. Good. The North needs strong men. Robert moved down the line, greeting each child with varying degrees of interest. He paused at Arya, amused by her refusal to curtsy properly, lingered on Sansa, noting her beauty. And then, his eyes landed on Jon. Catelyn's breath stopped. "And who's this?" Robert asked, looking Jon up and down. "Another son, Ned?" "Bit dark for a Stark." "My ward, your grace," Ned said smoothly. "Jon Snow. My late sister's son." Robert's expression shifted. Something complicated crossed his face. Pain, anger, old grief. "Lyanna's boy?" "Yes, your grace." The king stepped closer to Jon, studying him intently. Jon kept his face neutral, his eyes downcast respectfully, exactly as Catelyn had instructed. "Lyanna," Robert said softly. "God's boy, you have her look. The long face, the eyes. You're the very image of her." "I'm told I favor my mother, your grace," Jon said quietly. "Your father?" "Died in the war, your grace. Before I was born." Robert continued to stare at Jon, and Catelyn felt ice spreading through her veins. This was it. This was the moment. Robert would see something, would recognize something, would ask the question that would unravel everything. "Well," Robert said finally, "at least Lyanna left something behind. A son. That's something." He clapped Jon on the shoulder, hard enough to make Jon stagger slightly. "You look like you can fight, boy." "Do you train?" "Yes, your grace. Sir Roderick Cassel teaches me and Lord Robb." "Good. We'll have a tourney while I'm here. I want to see what the young northern wolves can do." Robert turned back to Ned, already losing interest in Jon. "Now where's this crypt you've been keeping? I want to pay my respects to Lyanna." Ned's face went pale, but he nodded. "Of course, your grace. I'll take you down immediately." They moved into the castle, the royal party following. Catelyn stayed behind for a moment, her legs shaking so badly she wasn't sure she could walk. Jon approached her cautiously. "My lady? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she lied. "You did well, Jon. Very well. Continue as you did, respectful, brief, unremarkable." "He said I look like my mother." "Yes." That seemed to sadden him. "Robert loved Lyanna," Catelyn said. "Seeing you reminded him of what he lost. That's all. Don't dwell on it." But Jon's expression was troubled. He asked about my father. "You don't think—" "I think you answered appropriately, and the king moved on," Catelyn interrupted. "Now come, we have guests to attend to." She walked into the castle, Jon following a few steps behind, and prayed to every god she could name that they'd survived the worst of it. But she knew, deep in her bones, she knew that this was only the beginning. The feast. That night, Winterfell's great hall was filled to capacity. The Starks and their household mixed with the king's retinue, northern simplicity rubbing against southern opulence. The high table groaned under the weight of food. Roasted meats, fresh bread, honeyed cakes, wine flowing like water. Robert sat at the center, already deep into his cups, laughing too loud and eating too much. Queen Cersei sat beside him, her expression one of barely concealed disgust at her husband's behavior. The royal children were arrayed along the table, Joffrey looking bored and superior, Myrcella sweet and well-mannered, Tommen shy and overwhelmed. Ned sat at Robert's other side, and Catelyn sat beside Ned, positioned where she could observe everything, while appearing to simply manage her household. Jon sat further down the table, between Robb and Theon. He'd been seated deliberately, close enough to be part of the family, but far enough from Robert to avoid prolonged interaction. He ate quietly, speaking only when spoken to, exactly as Catelyn had asked, but she couldn't stop watching him, couldn't stop cataloging every glance Robert threw his way. Every moment the king's attention drifted toward that end of the table. "Your ward," Queen Cersei said suddenly, her voice cutting through the noise. She was looking at Catelyn with those calculating green eyes. "Lyanna's son. How tragic that she died so young."
"Yes," Catelyn said carefully.
"The war took many good people. And the father? I understand he died as well?" "Before Jon was born, yes. How convenient that you took the boy in. Many women wouldn't be so generous with their lord husband's ward, especially one who reminds them of his dead sister." The words were barbed, designed to provoke. Cersei was testing her, seeing how she'd react. "Jon is family," Catelyn said, her voice steady. "We protect our family in the north. It's what separates us from other places." The implication was clear. "We're not like you Southerners. We have honor." Cersei's smile was cold. How admirable. I'm sure the boy appreciates your sacrifice. Before Catelyn could respond, Robert's voice boomed out. Ned, tell me about this tourney. I want to see your boys fight. See if Northern steel is as strong as Southern. We're not as formal with our tournaments as you are in the South, Your Grace, Ned said. But we can arrange some melees, some archery competitions. Good. I want to see the wolves and the lions test each other, see which produces better warriors. Robert's eyes found Jon again. The ward fights too, yes? Jon trains with Robb, Your Grace, Ned said carefully. He's quite skilled. Excellent. I'll be watching, boy, Robert called down the table. I want to see if Lyanna's son has any of her fire. Jon bowed his head respectfully. I'll do my best to honor her memory, Your Grace. See that you do. The feast continued. The wine flowed. Robert grew drunker and louder, telling war stories and laughing at his own jokes. Cersei grew colder and more contemptuous. The northern lords grew more uncomfortable with southern excess. And through it all, Catelyn sat and smiled and played her part, while inside she counted down the minutes until this ordeal would be over. It was near midnight when things finally went wrong. Robert, drunk and maudlin, had started talking about Lyanna, about how beautiful she'd been, how wild, how perfect. Ned was trying to deflect, to change the subject, but Robert wouldn't be moved. She was too good for this world, Robert slurred. Too good for me, certainly. But she was mine, Ned. She was supposed to be mine. And that bastard Rhaegar stole her away and killed her. Killed her as surely as if he'd put a sword through her heart. Your Grace, Ned said quietly. Perhaps we should. Do you know what I would do if I could? Robert interrupted. If I could go back? I'd kill him slower. I'd make it last. I'd make him suffer for what he did to her. Down the table, Jon had gone very still. Catelyn could see his hands clenched tight around his cup, his face carefully blank. And those children, Robert continued. Rhaegar's spawn. I'm glad they're dead. Glad we wiped out every trace of him. The world is better without Targaryen blood polluting it. Robert, Ned said, his voice sharp now. That's enough. Is it enough? Because sometimes I wonder if we got them all. If there's some Targaryen bastard hiding somewhere, waiting to rise up and, Your Grace! Catelyn stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. Perhaps you'd like to retire? The journey has been long and… I'm fine, Lady Stark, Robert said, waving her off. Sit down. I'm just remembering what we lost, what that silver-haired bastard took from us. Jon's face had gone white. His knuckles were bloodless around his cup. And Catelyn saw, with horrible clarity, the moment when suspicion entered his mind. The way Robert talked about Targaryens, the way he'd looked at Jon earlier, saying he had Lyanna's look. The questions about Jon's father that no one could answer. Jon was smart. He was always smart. And right now, drunk King Robert was giving him pieces of a puzzle he'd been trying to solve for years. No, Catelyn thought desperately. No, not now. Not like this. Jon, she said sharply, would you check on the kitchens? Make sure the servants have enough wine for tomorrow's feast. Jon looked at her, and their eyes met across the hall. She saw the questions there, saw the fear, saw the terrible dawning understanding. But he stood, bowed to the table, and left the hall, ghost materializing from the shadows to follow him out. Catelyn breathed again. Good lad, Robert said, not even noticing. Knows when to leave the men to their drinking. Ned, tell me about the wall. Is it true the wildlings are massing beyond it? The conversation moved on. Robert forgot about Targaryens and Lyanna and his maudlin grief, focused now on military matters. The danger had passed, for now. But Catelyn knew, with the cold certainty of someone who'd lived with a secret for 16 years, that everything had just changed. Jon suspected, and suspicion was the first step toward discovery. She found him 2 hours later in the Godswood. The heart tree loomed above him, its white bark and red leaves stark against the darkness. Jon stood before it, one hand pressed to the trunk. His head bowed. Ghost sat at his feet, white as fresh snow in the moonlight. Jon, Catelyn said quietly, he didn't turn. Is it true, what the king said, about Rhaegar's children being murdered? Yes. Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon were killed on Tywin Lannister's orders during the sack of King's Landing. Robert celebrated their deaths, because they were Targaryens. Yes, Because their blood was dangerous. Yes. Jon finally turned to face her. In the dim light, his gray eyes looked black. Why are you telling me this, Lady Catelyn? Why does it matter to me? Because you asked. No. Jon's voice was steady, but intense. No, you're telling me because you want me to understand something. You want me to understand why. He stopped, took a breath. My father, the one who died in the war. You said he was a loyal man who served House Stark. Yes. Was he loyal to House Stark or to House Targaryen? The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Catelyn could lie, could deflect, could do what she'd done for 16 years, protect the secret at all costs. But looking at Jon's face, seeing the fear and confusion and desperate need for truth, she couldn't do it. Jon, she said quietly, there are things you don't understand. Things that are dangerous to know. Tell me anyway. I can't. Not here. Not now. Not with the king. Tell me. Jon's voice rose, echoing off the trees. Please, I need to know. I've spent my whole life wondering who I am, where I came from, why no one will tell me the truth about my father. And now the king is here, talking about murdering Targaryen children, and you're looking at me like I'm about to die, and I need to know why. Catelyn looked at this boy she'd protected for 16 years. This boy who'd grown into a young man brave and good and desperately in need of answers she couldn't give. Not here, she said finally. And not now. But Jon, I promise you, when the king leaves, when it's safe, you'll know everything. You have my word. Your word? Jon laughed bitterly. How can I trust your word when everything else has been a lie? I've never lied to you, Catelyn said sharply. I've withheld information, yes. But everything I've told you has been true. I am trying to protect you. Your uncle is trying to protect you. If you trust nothing else, trust that. Jon stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, I'll wait. But when he leaves, you'll have answers, Catelyn promised. I swear it by the old gods and the new. She left him standing in the gods' wood, alone with his wolf and his questions, and walked back to the castle with the crushing knowledge that their time had run out. They couldn't keep the secret anymore. Not from Jon. Not when he was this close to the truth. When Robert left Winterfell, they would have to tell him everything, and pray to every god there was that he could handle it. The tournament. The tournament was held 3 days later. A series of melees and archery contests designed to showcase northern prowess without the elaborate formality of southern tourneys. The whole castle turned out to watch. Robert sat in a place of honor, drinking steadily, shouting encouragement or mockery, depending on his mood. Cersei sat beside him, looking bored. The children watched with varying degrees of interest, and Catelyn sat with her heart in her throat, watching her sons prepare to fight in front of a king who would kill one of them if he knew the truth. The first melee was between the younger fighters, boys 14 to 16. Robb, Jon, and Theon all participated, along with several other northern youths. They were given blunted swords and divided into 2 teams. The goal was simple: defeat your opponents without serious injury. Last team standing won. Jon was on Robb's team, and Catelyn watched them work together with the practiced ease of brothers who'd trained side by side their entire lives. Robb took the lead, commanding the team with natural authority. Jon protected his flank, his sword a blur of motion as he deflected attacks and created openings. They were beautiful to watch, terrifying in their competence. Look at them, Robert boomed, clearly delighted. Fighting like a unit. That's how you win battles, boys. That's how you survive. The melee ended with Robb and Jon's team victorious. They stood in the center of the field, breathing hard, covered in sweat and grinning at each other. Excellent, excellent. Robert stood, applauding. Come here, boys. Let me see you up close. Robb and Jon approached the royal platform. Catelyn's fingernails dug into her palms. You fight well together, Robert said, looking between them, like real brothers. That's good. That's the northern way. Pack loyalty, isn't it? Yes, Your Grace, Robb said. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Good words, good lesson. Robert's eyes shifted to Jon. And you, Ward, you're fast. Faster than your cousin. Where'd you learn to move like that? Sir Roderick Cassell trained us both, Your Grace, Jon said. But I'm smaller than Robb. I have to be faster to compensate. Smart thinking. Robert studied Jon for a moment longer, and Catelyn saw something shift in his expression. Recognition? Suspicion? She couldn't tell. You know, boy, you remind me of someone. Can't quite place it, but there's something about you. He has the Stark look, Your Grace, Ned interrupted quickly. My sister's son through and through. Yes, that must be it. The Stark look. But Robert still looked puzzled, like he was trying to remember something just out of reach. Catelyn felt sick. The moment passed. Robert lost interest and called for more wine. The boys were dismissed, and they walked back to the sidelines together, but the damage was done. Robert had noticed something, had seen something in Jon that sparked recognition. How long before that recognition crystallized into realization? That night, Catelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Ned, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through scenarios. What if Robert asked more questions? What if he demanded to know who Jon's father was? What if he looked at Jon and suddenly saw a Rhaegar Targaryen instead of Lyanna Stark? What if everything they'd built came crashing down? He suspects, she whispered into the darkness. No, Ned said quietly. He's curious. That's not the same as suspicious. He said Jon reminds him of someone. Jon reminds him of Lyanna. That's all. Robert sees her in Jon's face, and it stirs old grief. Nothing more. But what if it's not just Lyanna he's seeing? What if... Cat. Ned rolled over to face her. In the faint moonlight through the window, his expression was serious. We can't fall apart now. We've made it this far. Robert is drunk most of the time. He's not thinking clearly. He's certainly not thinking about Targaryens when he looks at Jon. He sees Lyanna's son, just like we told him to. How can you be so calm? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I'm also practiced at hiding it. Ned took her hand. We're going to get through this. Robert will finish his visit, make his offer. What offer? Ned hesitated. He wants me to be Hand of the King. Jon Arryn is dead. Robert needs someone he trusts in King's Landing. Catelyn sat up abruptly. No, absolutely not. You can't go south. You can't leave Jon here unprotected. And you certainly can't bring him to King's Landing where... I know. I'm going to refuse. Can you refuse a king? I'm going to try. Ned pulled her back down, wrapping his arms around her. I'll tell him I'm needed in the north. That winter is coming, and I can't abandon my responsibilities. He'll be disappointed, but he'll understand. Robert knows duty. And if he doesn't accept your refusal, then we'll face that when it comes. But Cat, no matter what happens, Jon stays here. He stays in the north where we can protect him. That's not negotiable. Catelyn nodded against his chest, but she couldn't shake the feeling of doom settling over her like a shroud. Something was coming. Something worse than Robert's visit. She could feel it in her bones. The secret they'd kept for 16 years was beginning to unravel, and she didn't know how to stop it. The offer Robert made his offer the next day, in Ned's solar, with only the two of them present. Catelyn waited outside, pacing the hallway, her hands twisted together with anxiety. She'd sent Jon hunting with Robb and Theon, wanting him away from the castle while this conversation happened. The door finally opened. Ned emerged, his face grave. Well? Catelyn demanded. He wants me to be Hand, just as we suspected. And? I refused, told him I'm needed here. That the North requires its lord, especially with winter coming. That I can't abandon my responsibilities. How did he take it? Poorly. Ned ran a hand through his hair. He said I'm abandoning him. That he needs someone he can trust in King's Landing. That the Lannisters are circling like sharks and he needs a friend at his side. But you held firm? Yes, I told him. Ned paused. I told him I'm honored by the offer, but I must refuse. My place is in the north. Relief washed over Catelyn. Then it's done. He'll leave and things can go back to normal. There's more. Ned's expression was troubled. He wants to betroth Sansa to Joffrey, unite our houses, make her a queen someday. Catelyn's breath caught. Sansa? But she's only 13. The marriage wouldn't happen for years. But the betrothal, Robert wants it formalized before he leaves. What did you say? I said I'd discuss it with you, that such a decision requires thought. Ned met her eyes. Cat, what do we do? If we refuse, Robert will be insulted. But if we agree, if we send Sansa south, she'd be in the Lannisters' clutches, in King's Landing surrounded by vipers. Catelyn shook her head. No. I won't send my daughter into that nest of lies and cruelty. Then we refuse. and hope Robert accepts it gracefully. But Catelyn knew, with sinking certainty, that Robert would not accept it gracefully, that their refusal would damage the relationship between the Starks and the crown, that consequences would follow. She just didn't know what form those consequences would take. Robert left Winterfell 3 days later, his retinue trailing behind him like a golden wound through the northern landscape. The household breathed a collective sigh of relief. The tension that had gripped the castle for 2 weeks finally released, and life began to return to normal. But normal was different now. Changed, because Jon knew something was wrong. Because Robert had looked at him with recognition. Because the secret was closer to the surface than it had ever been. The morning after Robert's departure, Catelyn found Jon in the Godswood again. He seemed to spend all his time there now, standing before the heart tree, seeking answers from gods who gave none. "Jon," she said, "we need to talk." In the morning light, he looked older than 16. Looked like a man who'd seen too much and understood too little. "You promised me answers," he said. "When the king left, you promised. And I'll keep that promise." Catelyn took a breath, steeling herself. "But not here. And not alone. This conversation involves your uncle as well. Come to the Solar tonight, after supper. The truth, all of it, will be yours." Jon studied her face. "And if I don't like what I hear, then we deal with that when it comes. But Jon, you deserve to know. You've always deserved to know. We couldn't tell you while Robert was here, while the danger was so immediate. Because the danger had something to do with me. Yes, because I'm—" He stopped himself. "Never mind. Tonight. I'll hear it tonight." He walked away, ghost at his heels, leaving Catelyn alone in the Godswood with her fear and her guilt and the knowledge that tonight everything would change. Tonight, Jon would learn what he was. And they would have to hope that the truth didn't destroy him. Revelation. The Solar was quiet that night, lit only by candles and the glow from the hearth. Outside, a autumn storm was building, wind rattling the shutters, the first hints of the coming winter in the air. Jon entered precisely at the appointed time. He'd bathed and changed into clean clothes, his dark hair still damp, his face composed but his eyes sharp with anticipation and fear. Ghost padded beside him, the massive direwolf's presence filling the room with an otherworldly quality. Ned stood by the window, his back to the room, his shoulders rigid with tension. Catelyn sat in a chair near the fire, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "Close the door," Ned said without turning around. Jon closed the door and stood before it as if ready to flee at any moment. "You promised me the truth, and you'll have it." Ned finally turned to face him. In the candlelight, his face looked haggard, aged beyond his years. "Sit, Jon. Please. I'd rather stand. This isn't easy for any of us," Catelyn said quietly. "Please, Jon, sit." Jon moved to a chair and sat, but perched on the edge like a bird ready to take flight. Ghost settled at his feet, red eyes tracking between Ned and Catelyn. Ned crossed to the hearth and stood before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared into the flames like they held answers he was searching for. "Do you know what happened at the Tower of Joy?" he asked finally. Jon blinked at the unexpected question. It was where the final battle of Robert's rebellion was fought, where you and 6 companions faced 3 Kingsguard, where," he paused, "where you found my mother, where she died." "Yes, all of that is true." Ned's voice was heavy. "I rode to Dorne with 6 good men, Howland Reed, Willem Dustin, Ethan Glover, Martin Cassell, Theo Wall, Mark Risewell. We found the Tower of Joy guarded by 3 of the finest knights who ever lived. Sir Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning, Sir Oswell Went, Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, the White Bull." "I know this story," Jon said, confusion evident. "Uncle, what does this have to do with—" "Let me finish." Ned held up a hand. 3 Kingsguard, guarding a tower in Dorne. Do you know why they were there? Why 3 of the greatest knights in Westeros were standing watch over an empty tower instead of fighting in the war? Jon shook his head slowly. "Because it wasn't empty. Lyanna was there, your mother. She'd been there for months, kept in that tower while Robert's rebellion burned across the realm." Ned's voice was rough now, heavy with old grief. "The Kingsguard were there because she was there, because Rhaegar Targaryen had left her there. Because she was pregnant," Jon interrupted, understanding dawning. She was pregnant with me. Yes, but if Rhaegar left her there, if the King's Guard were protecting her, then that means Jon's face had gone pale. That means Rhaegar didn't kidnap her. That means she went with him willingly. Catelyn watched Jon's face as the pieces started to come together, watched him work through it with that sharp mind of his, connecting dots that should have stayed unconnected. We fought them, Ned continued. 3 against 7, and they nearly won. Mark and Willem died in the first exchange. Sir Oswell killed Theo. Sir Gerald cut down Martin. Sir Arthur, Ned's voice broke. Arthur Dane was the finest swordsman I ever saw. He killed Ethan, would have killed me too, if not for Howland Reed. Howland stabbed him from behind, Jon said. It was a famous story, told in every tavern in the north. Dishonorable, but necessary. Yes. And when it was done, when all 3 King's Guard lay dead, I went into the tower. I found Lyanna in a bed of blood, dying from childbed fever. Ned's hands were shaking now. She was holding you in her arms. She'd just given birth, and she made me promise, made me swear, that I would protect you, that I would keep you safe from Robert. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jon sat very still. His breathing had gone shallow. Safe from Robert, he repeated. Why would I need protection from the king? Unless you were Rhaegar's son, Catelyn said quietly. Jon's head snapped toward her. His eyes were wide, disbelieving. What? Your father wasn't some nameless soldier who died in the war, Ned said. Your father was Rhaegar Targaryen, crown prince of the 7 kingdoms. The man Robert Baratheon killed on the Trident. The man he hated more than anyone else in the world. No. Jon stood abruptly, knocking his chair over. Ghost rose with him, a low growl rumbling in the direwolf's throat. No, that's not your lying. You have to be lying. I wish I were, Ned said. But Jon, it's the truth. You are Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen's son. You have Stark blood and Targaryen blood. You are a prince. Jon's laugh was harsh, hysterical. You're telling me I'm a prince? That I'm, what, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne? That's insane. He pressed his hands to his head. This is insane. Jon, listen. Catelyn started. Listen to what? To more lies? Because that's all this has been, hasn't it? My entire life. Everything you've told me about my mother, my father, who I am, all of it was lies. Jon's voice was rising, his composure cracking. You let me believe I was the son of some minor knight. You let me think my father was a loyal man who died honorably. You let me live a lie for 16 years. To keep you alive. Ned's voice rose to match Jon's. Jon, if Robert had known, if anyone had known, you would have died, murdered like Aegon and Rhaenys. Do you understand? Your very existence is treason. Hiding you, protecting you, claiming you as my own, that's all treason. If Robert had discovered the truth, he would have killed you. Would have killed all of us. Then why keep me at all? Jon demanded. Why not leave me at the tower? Let me die with my mother? It would have been easier than this. Because Lyanna begged me to save you. Ned's composure broke completely. Because she died putting you in my arms and making me swear that I would protect you no matter the cost. Because you're my blood, Jon. My sister's son. My nephew. How could I let you die? Jon staggered back, hitting the wall. He slid down it slowly until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. Ghost pressed against him, whining softly. Catelyn rose and moved toward him, but Ned caught her arm, shaking his head. Give him time. They waited in silence. The only sounds were the crackling fire, the wind outside, and Jon's ragged breathing as he tried to process what he'd just learned. Finally, Jon looked up. His face was wet with tears. Rhaegar Targaryen was my father. Yes, Ned said gently. The man who stole my mother away, who started a war, who got her killed. It's more complicated than that, Catelyn said. She moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Lyanna went with him willingly. She loved him, Jon. And he loved her. What they did was, it was foolish perhaps, selfish, but it wasn't cruelty. It wasn't kidnapping. How do you know? Were you there? No, but I know what Ned found at the Tower of Joy. I know what Lyanna told him before she died. She loved Rhaegar. She chose to be with him. And she loved you, Jon, more than her own life. Jon laughed bitterly. She died because of me. They all died because of me. Thousands of people dead in a war started because Rhaegar wanted my mother, and I'm the result. His voice broke. I'm the reason she's dead. No, Ned said firmly. He knelt beside Jon, gripping his shoulders. You are not to blame for the war. You didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose your parents. The war happened because of choices made by Rhaegar and Lyanna. By King Aerys, by Robert, by everyone except you. You bear no guilt for their actions. But I bear the consequences, Jon said. I'm a Targaryen. Robert Baratheon would kill me if he knew, which means I can never tell anyone. Can never be anything except what you've made me. A ward. A false identity. A lie. You're Jon, Catelyn said. She knelt on Jon's other side. You're the boy we raised. The young man who trained with Robb and protected Arya and climbed with Bran. That's not a lie, Jon. That's who you are. But it's not all of who I am. Jon looked between them, his gray eyes. Stark eyes, full of anguish. I'm Targaryen. I'm the son of the prince everyone hates. What did Robert say at the feast? He said he was glad Rhaegar's children were dead. He said the world was better without Targaryen blood. Robert is a bitter man, clinging to old hatreds, Ned said. His words don't define your worth, don't they? He's the king. He defines everything. Jon pulled away from both of them and stood, pacing the room like a caged wolf. Ghost followed him, pressed against his leg. Why are you telling me this now? Why after 16 years of lies? Because you were getting close to the truth, Catelyn said. Because you needed to understand the danger you're in. Because. She took a breath. Because you deserve to know who you are. We should have told you sooner. We should have trusted you with this. But we were afraid. Afraid of what the knowledge would do to you. Afraid of what would happen if you told someone by accident. Afraid of... Her voice broke. Afraid of losing you. Jon stopped pacing and stared at her. Losing me? You hate me. You've always hated me. No. The word came out fierce, certain. Catelyn stood and crossed to him. No, Jon. I've never hated you. I've been afraid of you, afraid of what your existence means, what danger you represent. But hate? Never. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. A brave young man. You didn't choose your blood any more than you chose your birth. And I... She reached out and cupped his face, wiping away tears with her thumbs. I have spent 16 years protecting you because it was necessary. Because your death would have meant all our deaths. But somewhere along the way, Jon, you became more than a secret to keep. You became... Her own tears started falling. You became my son, not by blood, but by choice. By 16 years of watching you grow into someone good and honorable and kind despite all the reasons you had to be bitter. I'm proud of you, Jon, and I'm sorry, so sorry that we lied to you for so long. Jon stood frozen like he didn't know how to process this. Finally, he whispered, You're proud of me? So proud. Catelyn pulled him into an embrace, and after a moment's hesitation, Jon's arms came around her. He was shaking, his whole body trembling with the weight of what he'd learned. Ned joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them. They stood there in the solar, a strange, fractured family bound by secrets and lies and love that had grown despite all the reasons it shouldn't have, and let themselves grieve for all the years of deception. When they finally pulled apart, Jon's face was wet but his eyes were clearer. What happens now? He asked. Now, Ned said, we continue as we have been. You are Jon, Ward of Winterfell. That's the story. That's the truth that matters. Your Targaryen blood remains secret. For how long? Forever if we're lucky, Catelyn said. Or at least until Robert dies. Until the realm changes enough that your heritage isn't an automatic death sentence. That could be decades. Yes. Jon moved to the window, looking out at the storm. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the courtyard below. And if I don't want to keep lying? If I want, I don't know, something different? What do you want? Ned asked gently. I don't know. Jon pressed his forehead against the cold glass. I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I was one thing, and now I'm another, and I don't. He stopped. I need time to think. To understand what this means, take all the time you need, Catelyn said. But Jon, you can't tell anyone. Not Robb, not your siblings, not your closest friends. The fewer people who know, the safer you are. I understand. Thank you for telling me. Finally. Even if it's terrible, at least I know. Will you be all right? Ned asked. I don't know, Jon said honestly. But I'll manage. I always do. He left the solar, ghost at his heels, leaving Ned and Catelyn alone with the dying fire and the storm outside. Do you think we did the right thing? Catelyn asked. Telling him? I don't know, Ned said. But it was time. He deserved the truth, even if the truth is painful. What if he tells someone? What if he can't keep the secret? He will. Jon is strong. He's survived 16 years of not quite belonging. He'll survive this too. But Catelyn wasn't sure. Because knowing a secret was one thing. Living with it, truly living with it, was something else entirely. And Jon had just learned a secret that could destroy him and everyone he loved. She could only pray he was strong enough to bear it. The aftermath. The days that followed were strange. Jon went about his normal routines, training with Robb, studying with Maester Luwin, taking meals with the family. But there was a distance to him now, a wall that hadn't been there before. He was present but not fully there, his mind clearly elsewhere. Robb noticed first. Is something wrong with Jon? He asked Catelyn one morning. He's been quiet, more than usual. He has a lot on his mind, Catelyn said carefully. Growing up is difficult. Figuring out who you are, what you want from life, it weighs on young men. Maybe I should talk to him. Maybe you should just be his brother. That's what he needs most right now. Robb nodded and went off to find Jon, and Catelyn prayed she'd given the right advice. Arya was more direct. She cornered Catelyn in the sewing room, her young face fierce with determination. What did you do to Jon? What do you mean? He's sad. And quiet. More than normal. Did you yell at him? Did someone hurt him? No, sweet one, Jon is fine. He's just struggled for an explanation an 11-year-old would accept. He's thinking about the future, about what comes next for him. That's all. Because he's a ward? Arya's voice was sharp. Because he's not really our brother? He is your brother. Where you're born doesn't matter as much as how you're raised. Jon is Pack. That will never change. Then why is he so sad? Because sometimes the world is unfair, Catelyn said honestly. And Jon is old enough now to understand that. But he's strong, Arya. He'll be all right. Arya didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. Only Ned seemed to understand what Jon was going through. He would seek Jon out in the God's Wood or the training yard, would sit with him in silence or talk quietly about nothing important. He was giving Jon space while also making sure Jon knew he wasn't alone. It was what Jon needed, Catelyn realized. Not answers. He had those now. But steady presence. Someone who understood the burden he carried. A week after the revelation, Catelyn found Jon in the library. It was late, well past midnight, and he was surrounded by books, histories of the Targaryen dynasty, accounts of the rebellion. Everything he could find about Rhaegar. You should be sleeping, Catelyn said from the doorway. Jon looked up, startled. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to know about him, my father, who he was, what he was like, and, what have you learned? That everyone hates him. That they call him a fool and a kidnapper and a madman? That, Jon's voice wavered, that he destroyed his own family. His wife and children died because of him. The realm burned because of him, and I'm his son. His legacy. Catelyn entered the library and sat across from him. You're not responsible for what your father did. His choices are his own, but I'm the result of those choices. I exist because Rhaegar Targaryen fell in love with my mother and started a war. How do I live with that? The same way you've lived with everything else. One day at a time. Catelyn reached across the table and took his hand. Jon, I know this is hard. I know learning the truth has shaken you. But you need to understand something. You are not Rhaegar Targaryen. You're Jon, the boy who saved Arya from falls, who trained with Robb, who's kind to servants and fair in judgment. That's who you are. Your blood doesn't change that, doesn't it? Everyone says blood matters. That's why bastards are lesser. That's why lineage determines everything. My blood makes me a prince, but it also makes me a target. It makes me dangerous to everyone around me. Yes, Catelyn said honestly, it does. But we've managed the danger for 16 years. We'll continue managing it. And Jon, she squeezed his hand. You're not alone in this. You never have been. Your uncle and I, we've carried this secret together. Now you carry it with us. That's how we survive. Together. Jon looked at her with those gray Stark eyes, and something in his expression softened. Thank you for protecting me all these years. I didn't understand before, didn't realize what you were risking, but I do now. And I'm grateful. You don't need to thank me for doing what any mother would do. You're not my mother, Jon said, but there was no bitterness in it. Just fact. No, Catelyn agreed. I'm not. Lyanna was your mother, but I've tried to honor her memory by keeping you safe, by giving you the childhood she would have wanted you to have. And Jon, whether you call me mother or my lady or anything else, know that I care about you, that your safety matters to me, not just because of what your death would mean for my family, but because you matter. You, Jon. Jon's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just be careful, be smart, and remember that you're not alone. She left him in the library with his books and his questions, and prayed that he would find some measure of peace with what he'd learned. The choice a month after the revelation, Jon came to Ned with a decision. They were in Ned's solar, reviewing the household accounts. Winter was approaching in earnest now, and preparations were consuming more and more of Ned's time. Uncle, Jon said, I've been thinking about the future, about what I want to do with my life. Ned set down his quill and gave Jon his full attention. All right. What have you decided? I want to join the Night's Watch. The words fell like stones into still water. Ned went very still. What? The Night's Watch. I want to take the black. Join my Uncle Benjen on the wall. Jon, no, you can't. Why not? Jon's voice was calm, measured. He'd clearly thought this through. I'm a ward with no prospects. I can't inherit. I can't marry well. My best option is to make something of myself through service. The Night's Watch is honorable. It's a place where my birth doesn't matter, where I can be judged on my own merit. Your birth matters everywhere, Ned said sharply. Jon, if you go to the wall, if you take those vows, you can never leave, never marry, never have children. You're giving up your entire future. What future? Jon stood, pacing. I'm 16. I'm old enough to understand what my life will be. I'll stay here at Winterfell, training and serving, but always apart. Always not quite family. Or I can go to the wall and serve a purpose. Defend the realm. Be something more than just, he gestured helplessly. More than just a secret that needs protecting. The Night's Watch is hard, Ned said. It's cold and dangerous and thankless. The men who serve there, many are criminals. Rapists and murderers who chose the wall over execution. Is that really what you want? I want to matter. I want my life to mean something beyond surviving. Jon met Ned's eyes. Uncle, I know what I am. I know what blood runs in my veins. I can never claim it, never use it. I'll spend my entire life hiding who I really am. But at the wall, I can just be Jon. A brother of the Night's Watch. Nothing more, nothing less. Ned was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with grief. Is this about what you learned? About Rhaegar? Partly. But also, Jon struggled for words. I don't know where I belong anymore. I thought I knew. Thought I was just your ward, Lyanna's son. Part of the family, even if not fully. But now I know the truth, and it's too much. The secret is too heavy, and I'm tired of being a danger to everyone I love. You're not a danger. I am. If anyone discovers what I am, you die. Lady Catelyn dies. Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, all of you die for the crime of hiding me. I'm a walking death sentence for my entire family. How can I live with that? So you want to run away to the wall? Ned's voice was sharp. Hide behind your vows instead of facing your life here? I'm not running away. I'm choosing a path that makes sense. A path where I can serve honorably without endangering the people I love. Jon's voice broke. Please, Uncle, please. Let me do this. Let me have some control over my own life. Ned closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. You sound like Lyanna. She always wanted control over her own fate, too. Look where that got her. I'm not my mother. And I'm not my father. I'm just Jon. trying to figure out how to live with an impossible situation. The wall is permanent, Jon. There's no coming back from it. Are you sure this is what you want? Jon was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. Yes, I'm sure. Ned stood and crossed to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. Your mother, Lyanna, she made me promise to protect you, to keep you safe. I've spent 16 years honoring that promise. And now you're asking me to send you to the wall, to one of the most dangerous places in the realm. How do I reconcile that? By trusting that I can protect myself. By understanding that sometimes safety isn't physical. It's knowing you're not a burden, not a danger. Jon moved to stand beside Ned. I'll be safer at the wall than anywhere else. No one looks too closely at the Night's Watch. No one cares about their parentage or their past. I can disappear into the black, and the secret disappears with me. What about Catelyn? She's spent 16 years protecting you. What will she say? I don't know. But I'm asking your permission, Uncle, not hers. Ned turned to face him. I need time to think, to discuss this with Cat. This isn't a decision to make lightly. I understand. But Uncle, I've made my choice. I'm going to the wall. The only question is whether I go with your blessing or without it. You'd defy me? Ned's voice was sharp. I'd choose my own path, Jon replied. Isn't that what you and Lady Catelyn have been trying to teach me? To think for myself? To make decisions about my own future? Ned stared at him for a long moment. Then, despite everything, he smiled slightly. You have your mother's stubbornness. And your father's determination. Gods help the Night's Watch when you arrive at their gates. Is that a yes? It's a we'll discuss it. Give me a few days, Jon. Let me talk to Cat. Let me think about what's best. Jon nodded and left, and Ned stood alone in his solar, watching darkness fall over Winterfell. His nephew wanted to join the Night's Watch, wanted to take permanent vows that would remove him from the Game of Thrones forever, remove him from danger, or at least the danger of being used as a pawn in succession disputes. It made sense. It was probably even wise. But it broke Ned's heart all the same. Catelyn's reaction was immediate and visceral. Absolutely not, she said when Ned told her that evening. He can't go to the wall. He can't take those vows. He's 16 years old, Ned. Too young to give up his entire future. He's old enough to make his own decisions. No, he's not. He's reeling from learning the truth about his parentage. He's not thinking clearly. He's trying to run away from an impossible situation instead of what? Ned interrupted. Cat, what's his alternative? Stay here forever as a ward? Never marry, never have children of his own, because any wife would ask questions about his parentage? Spend his entire life living a lie? Yes, Catelyn said. If that's what keeps him safe, then yes. The wall is dangerous, Ned. Rangers die all the time beyond the wall. Wildlings attack. There are stories about things in the far north. Dead things. If we send Jon there, we're not sending him. He's choosing to go, because he's hurting, because he feels like a burden. We need to make him understand he's not, but he is, Ned said quietly. Cat, we both know it's true. His existence endangers all of us. Every day he stays at Winterfell is another day the secret could be discovered. Maybe Jon's right. Maybe the wall is the best place for him. Or maybe you just want him gone so you don't have to carry the burden anymore, Catelyn said sharply. Ned recoiled like she'd struck him. That's not fair, isn't it? You've spent 16 years living with this secret, lying to your best friend, lying to everyone. Maybe you see Jon's departure as a relief, a way to finally be free of the whole mess. I love that boy like he was my own son, Ned said, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. Sending him away would break my heart. But if it's what he wants, if it's what will keep him safe and give him a chance at a meaningful life, then I have to let him go. Catelyn sank into a chair, her anger draining away to leave only grief. He's just a boy. He's a young man, old enough to fight in a war, old enough to make his own choices about his future. But the wall is forever, Ned. Those vows, he can never come back, can never change his mind. Once he takes the black, he's lost to us. I know. Ned sat beside her, taking her hand. Believe me, Cat, I know. But maybe that's what Jon needs. Maybe permanent vows will give him the structure and purpose he's looking for. Maybe serving the realm will help him make peace with who he is. Or maybe he'll die beyond the wall, frozen and alone, and we'll never know. Catelyn's voice broke. I've spent 16 years protecting him. I can't just let him throw his life away. It's not throwing his life away. It's choosing a different path. A harder path, maybe, but not a meaningless one. They sat in silence for a long time, holding hands, both mourning a loss that hadn't happened yet but felt inevitable. Finally, Catelyn spoke. If he goes, if we let him do this, I want to say goodbye properly. I want him to know that we care, that we're not just relieved to be rid of him, we'll have a proper farewell, Ned promised. We'll make sure he knows he's loved, will we? Catelyn looked at him. Will he really believe it? After 16 years of secrets and lies? He'll believe it, Ned said. Because it's true. We love him, Cat. Both of us. In our own ways. And he knows that. Even if he's confused about everything else. Catelyn hoped he was right. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. That by letting Jon go, they were losing something precious they'd never get back. Departer. Jon left for the Wall on a cold morning 2 weeks later. The entire household turned out to see him off. The family, the servants, the guards, everyone who'd watched him grow up. He wore new traveling clothes and had provisions for the journey north. His sword was strapped to his back. Ghost stood at his side, massive and silent. Ned Stark had arrived the night before, having come south specifically to escort Jon to Castle Black. He'd been surprised by Jon's decision. Surprised and pleased. The Night's Watch needs men like you, Benjen had said. Smart, trained, with a sense of honor. You'll do well there, nephew. Jon had just nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Now they stood in the courtyard. The moment of departure arrived. Robb stepped forward first, pulling Jon into a fierce embrace. I don't understand why you're doing this, Robb said, his voice thick. But I'll miss you, brother. Write to me. Tell me about the Wall. I will, Jon promised. Arya was crying openly. She clung to Jon like she was afraid he'd disappear. Don't go. Please don't go. Why do you have to leave? Because I need to serve the realm, Jon said gently, stroking her hair. But I'll always be your brother, Arya. Distance doesn't change that. Promise? I promise. He said goodbye to each of the children. Sansa with stiff formality, Bran with tears, little Rickon with confusion. He thanked Maester Luwin for his teachings, clasped arms with Ser Roderick. Even Theon seemed genuine in his farewell. Finally, only Ned and Catelyn remained. Ned embraced Jon without words, just held him tight for a long moment. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. Be safe. Be smart. Remember who you are. I will, Uncle. I promise. Then Jon turned to Catelyn. For a moment, they just looked at each other. This woman who'd protected him for 16 years, and this boy she'd come to love despite all the reasons she shouldn't. Thank you, Jon said quietly. For everything. For keeping me safe. For caring. Catelyn pulled him into an embrace, holding him as tightly as she'd ever held her own children. Come back to us someday, she whispered in his ear. If the world changes, if it becomes safe, come home. I don't know if I can, Jon whispered back. Then write. Tell us about your life. Let us know you're well. She pulled back to look at him. You matter, Jon, to all of us. Don't ever forget that. I won't. He mounted his horse. Ghost loped alongside. Benjen gave the signal, and they rode out through Winterfell's gates, heading north toward the Wall and whatever future awaited there. Catelyn stood in the courtyard long after they'd disappeared from sight, her arm around Robb's shoulders, feeling like she'd just lost a son. Ned stood beside her, equally silent, equally bereft. Did we make the right choice? She asked. I don't know, Ned said honestly. But it was Jon's choice to make. All we can do now is hope it was the right one. Epilogue. The game changes 6 months after Jon left for the Wall. A raven arrived from King's Landing. Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, was dead. King Robert Baratheon was coming north to ask Ned Stark to take his place. Catelyn read the message with hands that had gone numb. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading for 16 years. Robert would come to Winterfell, would expect Ned to come south, would want to join their houses through marriage between Sansa and Joffrey. But Jon was at the Wall now, safe behind his vows, protected by the Night's Watch's ancient neutrality. The secret was safer than it had ever been. We have to go south, Ned said when she showed him the message. I can't refuse Robert again, not when he's asking for my help directly. Then we go, Catelyn said. but carefully. And we make sure Jon stays at the wall. No matter what happens in King's Landing, he's safest where he is." Agreed. They prepared for Robert's arrival, for the offer that would change their lives, for the Game of Thrones they were about to be dragged into. But this time, they had one less vulnerability, one less secret to protect. Because Jon was at the wall, living under a false name, protected by vows that would keep him out of succession disputes and royal intrigues. The game was still dangerous. The Lannisters were still vipers. The throne was still a death trap. But at least Jon was safe. At least one of their children was beyond Robert's reach. It would have to be enough. Far to the north, at Castle Black, Jon Snow stood on top of the wall and looked out at the haunted forest. He was a brother of the Night's Watch now. He'd taken his vows in the Godswood, spoken the words that would bind him for life. He'd given up his name, his claims, his entire future. And yet, he felt freer than he ever had at Winterfell. Here, no one cared about his parentage. No one whispered about his mother or wondered about his father. He was just Jon, a ranger in training, proving himself through skill and dedication. The secret still lived inside him. The knowledge of what he was, who he truly was, would never leave him. But for the first time in his life, it wasn't the most important thing about him. He was a brother of the Night's Watch, a defender of the realm, a man who'd chosen his own path. Whatever came next, whatever dangers lurked beyond the wall or in the machinations of southern courts, Jon would face it as himself, not as a prince, not as a secret, not as anyone's pawn, just as Jon. And that was enough. Ghost pressed against his leg, warm and solid and real. Jon rested his hand on the direwolf's head and watched the sun set over the wilderness. He was home.